Hey there! In today's video, I am going to show you how to create awesome textures and details on your amigurumi project with simply front loop and back loop stitches. There's all sorts of things that you can play around with, such as creating nostrils, ears. You can mess around with different stitches to make spikes or feathers, or you could add on details like these leaves on my Sea of the Strawberry Squid. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay, before we get into all the fun stuff, let's go over really quickly what front loop and back loop stitches are. So I have created a small flat circle just by increasing a couple of rounds. And I'll show you when you're making a regular single crochet stitch, you're going to go under both loops. And this is essentially stacking stitches on top of each other, so you would have a straight line. And right now we're ignoring, increasing and decreasing and the effect that that all has on your project. But now if we want to do a front loop stitch, if you look at the V's on the top, we're going to go under the front loop only, which is the loop closest to you. And then you would just complete your single crochet as normal. And this is going to cause that stitch to lean towards you. You can exaggerate this by pulling it down, creating kind of a 90-degree angle from the base, and it's going to be pointing towards you. And the opposite of that is if you wanted to do a back loop stitch, now we're going to look at the top and go into the back loop, or the loop that's furthest away from you, and finish our single crochet. And now with this version, it's going to be folded away from you. So the 90-degree angle that you're creating is pointing backwards, which this one is most commonly used with amigurumi. I'll get into that in just a second. Now for the sake of creating our little sample, I'm going to turn this into a cylinder shape by working a round of back loop single crochet only. And this is going to kind of fold the edge at a 90-degree angle to help us create that kind of tube shape. So I'm going to work this round up real quick and I'll be back to show you what it looks like and how this change in direction is going to affect the shape of our project. Okay, now that I have finished the round, you can see it looks a little bit like bowl shaped, but you can exaggerate this by pressing the bottom flat and pushing the sides inward a little bit so that it's a little bit more like a cylinder. And this will get more exaggerated the more rows of regular single crochet you worked, meaning there's no increases or decreases to change the outside shape. But this is just one way that you can use back loop or front loop single crochet to alter the shape or the direction that your project is going in. But now let's look at what you can do with the actual unworked loops that are left over from using this. So one good example of this is using back loop single crochet. And I did this in my Sea of the Strawberry Squid pattern. You can find this pattern for free on my blog. I'll have the link in the description box below. But what I did was you work from the bottom, or really the top of the head down, and then you leave a row, 2 rows actually, of back loop single crochet so that there's 2 rows of front loops that are exposed. And this is where we attach the different green yarn later to create these leaves and the tentacles on the inside. So this is just one way you can use this. You can also use this technique to add different like limbs, or if you wanted to do like ruffles on, say, like my Jacko Jelly pattern, I can show you that. This pattern is also available for free on my blog. It'll be linked below. But it's the same concept here. So we left a row of unworked front loops and we use that to attach later and create these ruffles. And unlike my strawberry squid, I did the tentacles separately. But like I said, it's just a matter of what kind of construction you want to do and a little bit of foresight when you're planning a project. But I just want you to think about all sorts of things that you can attach or continue while you're using these unworked loops that are exposed. There's honestly just tons of applications for this. Now, let's look at how you can actually use front loops to create all sorts of fun textures, like these ears that I did on Hernando the Hedgehog. And just a quick note, this version of Hernando the Hedgehog is not currently available. It is in testing at the moment as of April 3rd, 2024. Now, if you're watching this in the future, the updated version most likely will be released, so all those links will be updated when they're live. But you can find Hernando the Hedgehog for free on my blog. So Aside from that, what I did to create these ears was I worked a combination of front loop half double crochet and front loop double crochet stitches. And this left the back loop exposed. So in the next round, I worked single crochets into there, and that's what makes the ears pop up. So let's actually look at this in practice. I am going to work up a sample real quick off of our little cylinder. So I'm doing a couple stitches to get away from that stitch marker, and then I'm gonna work some ears that I'm just kind of making up on the fly. Let's do a front loop half double crochet into the next stitch, like so. And then I'm gonna do a front loop double crochet into the same stitch. Preferably work with yarn that doesn't split as bad as this does. And now let's do a treble crochet. So a front loop treble crochet in the same stitch. And then to come back down and round out the shape of this like faux ear, I'm going to do another double crochet and another half double crochet. And this is all worked into the same stitch. Now technically, whatever design you want to do, you can work across multiple stitches if you want. The ones I'm doing are worked in a single stitch, just for the sake of kind of keeping things a little bit more simple. So you see that unworked back loop, that is where we're going to work into next round. So that's how I created the ear. I'm going to finish this round real quick, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we work the next one. Okay, so I finished the end of the round, and I know this looks kind of funny. I ended up doing another ear to make it symmetrical. But now this following round is going to really pop the ears out and keep this shape looking like it's making sense. So we're going to keep the same amount of stitches. So I did 2 before the ear. I'm going to do those same 2. And then I'm going to put the stitch marker back, and we're going to keep the same stitch count. So I'm going to fold this ear down, and we're going to work only into that unworked back loop, like so. And it may be a little bit hard to find at first, but just be patient. So we're going to work that single crochet. Now we're going to kind of press the ear out of the way and look for the next single crochet. So if you see the half double is right there, and then the next one is right there. That's our single crochet. So that's the stitch we're going to work into. And then we're going to repeat the process all the way around, working the back loop behind the second ear. And I'll show you what it looks like when it's finished. So here you have it. These ears are now kind of popping out, and you didn't have to do any sewing. You might have a little dip here, but that'll actually work itself out later on as you do more rounds of the project. But for this little sample, it's not too bad. And I'm just making this stuff up on the spot, to be honest. There's all sorts of stitches that you could play around with. In fact, I'm going to do a couple more rounds, and then we're going to mess around with some shell or fan-like stitches and even some chains, and I'll show you just kind of an example of what you can do with this stuff. I've worked a couple of rounds, and for these ones, what I ended up doing was working a double crochet, a chain 2, and then a double crochet all into the same front loop stitch, and then in between them I did 1 regular single crochet. So this kind of creates like little mini shells or fans. So real quick, I'll show you what I mean and kind of how I did this. Now we're going to do a double crochet in the front loop of the next stitch, then chain 2, then double crochet back into the same front loop. So that's our first little mini fan or shell. Now we're going to go single crochet into the next stitch, and then I just repeated that 2 more times. So going into the front loop only, double crochet, chain 2, and then double crochet into the same stitch. And skipping ahead, then I worked a round of single crochet, making sure to fold those little fans down, working in the back loop that was left open, and they created these kind of like pointy little protrusions that I think would look really great as like spikes down the back of a project, or maybe even horns on the side of a dragon head. They could be like scales. Here you can see I'm doing this once again on the other side, so I'm folding those little fans down and working in the unworked back loops, making sure not to skip those single crochets that are in between. And I think this is so much fun, honestly, just playing around with all sorts of stitches to create different textures. So this was just one idea that I had. I'm going to do some chains and see how that looks. From this angle, it's kind of giving me Goofy Frog vibes. Okay, in this last little example, I did a slip stitch, chain 6, and a slip stitch all in the same front loop. So I'll show you how I did this kind of in real time. So working in the front loop only, I did a slip stitch, then chain 6, and then I did a slip stitch back into the same front loop, followed by a single crochet in between. And then I repeated that a couple of times to create these big long loops. And then just like in the previous examples, I did a round of single crochet around, working into the leftover back loops. And these ended up looking a little bit more feather-like, but it actually leaves some possibilities. You could crochet other like limbs on if you wanted to reattach and work into these chains. There's just like so much that you could do, and I'm just messing around with basic stitches. I mean, if you wanted to include like the feather stitch, which I have a tutorial on my blog for, or even bobble stitches, things like that, there's all sorts of stuff that you could do just by working into different front loops and back loops. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you're as inspired as I am to get started on your next amigurumi project. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.